It's 5:30, so we're gonna
Wow.
go ahead and get started. I'll just ask everyone to mute for a moment just so we're not getting background noise. Thank you. Well, I want to welcome everyone back. I know some people are still hopping on, but appreciate seeing a lot of familiar faces for those of you that were here on the 11th. So for those of you joining for the first time this evening, my name is Malini Sims. I'm a principal planner with the town. I will also be facilitating tonight's meeting. I am joined by Bayer Vella, planning manager, and Dave Gephardt, our town's chief financial officer. And all of us are here to support you this evening through the discussion. Now, before we get started tonight, I do want to make sure that everyone has had an opportunity to introduce themselves to the group. I really appreciated those of you who got here early and were having discussions and catching up. That's what makes the community in Zoom, so that was great to hear. But if you weren't at the meeting on the 11th or did not have a chance to introduce yourself, would you please raise your virtual hand now so we can have you introduce yourself? All right, so Brett, if you want to unmute yourself and introduce yourself to the group.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brett Willman. I grew up in Oro Valley and lived here pretty much my entire life, except 3 years in law school. I was out of state, but now I'm back.
Great, thank you. Dick? Oh, you're muted still.
Yeah, I grew up in Oro Valley myself. I grew up elderly, but I used to be a mayor and council member from 97 and got out 2004. And during that time, we did a lot of things. We got the marketplace, we built the library, we built the hospital, we bought the Naranja Town Park and the steam pump ranch, a lot of things. And I actually represented the town when we annexed land from state trust land up in Phoenix. And I had to appear in front of the governor and attorney general and the land commissioner. And the attorney general gave me all kinds of problems. And he told me afterwards he was just testing me. But
Great.
it's been a great life. And I love this town and will participate wherever I can feel I can add a little something.
Great. Thank you, Dick. Sarah?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Kaiser. Happy to be here. I grew up in Tucson and moved to Oro Valley about 8 years ago. So looking forward to being part of this.
Thank you, Sarah. All right. Anyone else who was not at the last meeting or unable to introduce themselves at the last meeting? I'll look for Chris.
Yeah, I'm new. I stumbled on the project a little late, so I think I submitted a application last week, and I submitted community development as the primary, and then it suggested select a secondary. So I saw that this one was the next available meeting. So yeah, interested in just being part of the team. Moved to Oro Valley about 4 years ago from Detroit. My family's here, and kind of like what I put on the application. I feel we can accomplish more together than as individuals. So just looking to find a spot where I can contribute the most.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And great jumping in. There's you'll see all the work they did last week and be able to jump right in. All right, I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so I'm going to just to get us to the discussion as quickly as possible tonight. I just have a couple background information to share, and then we'll get right into it. For those of you who were participating in the last meeting, just know we won't be using the whiteboard this time, mostly just the presentation. All right. All right. So the last time we all met, you all participated in a really great discussion that gave us a lot of additional guidance to help craft draft goals, policies, and actions. So our focus tonight is to walk through those drafts to make sure that they reflect what was heard not over the past year, but also from the meeting on February 11th. Now, I do want to emphasize the word draft because these are the first attempt to capture everything. The drafts will continue to be refined and will be sent back out to everyone for wordsmithing and further review. So again, just keep that in mind as we're going through the conversation. And our real goal tonight is to build consensus on these first drafts. We want to make sure that they capture everything that was heard. And for those of you who were at the kickoff meeting, you helped define the word consensus. So some of the definitions you gave us are shown on the screen. It's, making sure everything's headed down the right path, that we may not all agree with everything, but can accept it as a whole. And also just making sure that it's for what's best for the community. Again, please keep these in mind also as we go through the discussion this evening. So just a quick overview of goals, policies, and actions and how they work together and what we're striving to achieve here. So the goals are really the big picture of the three items, and they're answering the question, what are we striving for? So what are our desired results? The policies are kind of that bridge between the actions and the goals, and they really try to identify the direction or path that's needed to get to the goals. And then the most detailed element of the 10-year plan are the actions. And those are the specific steps that the town will take to achieve the policies and goals. And then lastly, before we get into our discussion tonight, I just want to remind folks of the ground rules that everyone accepted. Again, we need everyone's help to make sure that this meeting is efficient and productive. We do, similar to the last meeting, we have a fair amount to get through this evening, so I need everyone's help to stay focused on the topic that we're discussing at hand. I also just want to remind folks that disagreements are okay, and they're going to happen when we work in committees, right? But just to remind folks to always keep it respectful as we once again try to build that consensus with everyone. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, we're not going to be using the Zoom whiteboard. We're going to stay in this presentation style for tonight, but we will still be scribing your comments. We do prefer to hear from everyone and see your face when you're speaking so everybody knows who's talking. But if you are more comfortable or just need to out of necessity, the chat function is also available. As shown on the screen, we have 6 areas to get through tonight. They do kind of match up with the whiteboard that we used a couple weeks ago. I'll be keeping time to help us make sure we get through all 6 this evening, but also, again, just keep this in mind as we go through the discussion. I also do want to mention that at the end of the last meeting, we started a conversation about state shared revenue and just didn't have enough time to really further discuss it. So we will have time this evening to do that when we get to area 4 under revenue sources, specifically when we get to the goal, policy, and action related to state shared revenues. All right, so with that said, I'm going to just give me one moment while I get my screen set up. All right, so what you see on the screen is the first draft of actions, policies, and goals related to things that you told us should be maintained. And sorry, and Joyce, I did see your question. The best time to bring up things that were not discussed at the last meeting, if they fit in with any of the areas that we're going through, you can still bring new ideas up. That's absolutely a good time there. If it's something completely different from any of these, we may have time at the end. All right. And Mike, you had a question?
Well, and looking through this, sometimes the terminology we use is a bit misleading, or maybe not the correct terminology, what we mean. For example, in A2, it says routinely evaluate the minimum percentage of the contingency reserve balance. Now, that's terminology wise, that's not exactly right, but because we have contingency set up in the budget in case we have to purchase things that, or we needed some additional budget capacity. I hope in this particular case, they're talking about fund balances that the town has. So I think we just need to clarify that term there so that everybody is on the same page when they hear it.
Okay, thank you. I am writing down your comment. I do want to, before we get into comments, though, I just want to back up and make sure everybody's on the same page in terms of what we're looking at. So on the chart, what you're seeing is on the left, in the first column, that's the community guidance we heard over the past year through our first phase of this effort. The second column, that summarizes the whiteboard notes that folks added regarding management and reporting things to maintain. And the actual whiteboard comments are on the bottom of the screen. Now, I do know those might be a little difficult to see. So that the whiteboard charts were also sent out via email on Friday with the reminder for this meeting. So if you need to, please feel free to open that attachment for yourself on your computer, and you can, if you want to refer to those. And then the first column is, Mike, you were mentioning, is the actions. Again, those are going to be the more detailed actual steps we take. The second column is the policies, the path to get to the goal, and then the goal, of course, is the last column. So with that said, we do want to make sure that this accurately represents what you guys discussed. So I heard you, Mike, about clarifying what A2 means in terms of the contingency reserve balance. And I may ask Dave Gephardt on that note. I do know there is a minimum percentage that we try to maintain in our contingency reserve.
Yeah, Malini, it's really our general ending fund balance. We
Okay.
try to maintain, or really our fund balance in the general fund, we try to maintain a minimum percentage of 30% of expenditures.
Okay. So we will work on that language to make sure it's more accurate. So general.
This is Joe Branduber. That 30% is for the contingency reserve balance.
Yeah, Joe, it's really our general fund balance, which is the kind of the difference between our assets and our liabilities is what's kind of considered ending fund balance. And it builds over time or declines over time, depending on whether there's a surplus or a deficit in the fund.
So if the general fund balance is $100, the reserve is $30?
If the expenditures are $100, then we ought to have $30 sitting in reserve.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
And then Mike, we'll go back to you, and then Joyce, and then Richard.
That's all I had to say for right now. If you're talking.
No, I appreciate the clarification on that. We'll work with Dave to make sure that it's
Sure.
Accurate. And then Joyce.
So my comment was under the things to maintain with management and reporting. It says, the line says good system for splitting funds.
Yeah.
And while that's the case, that's not how funds are put into action. It's not because the town says it's how it's going to be. There's a best practice by the Government Accounting Standards Board. So I said, instead of a good system for splitting them, they should follow best practices as, I don't know, as defined by the Government Accounting Standards.
Okay.
And I see, Dave, you understand that, right?
Best practices.
Correct. Yes.
And so Joyce, just to follow up on that, so for A1, I think that's what we're trying to, that's what
It
we're
is.
trying to attempt to get that. So,
Well, it's actually under the guidance. You have good system for splitting funds is under guidance.
yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. But I guess my question, Joyce, is does the action step A1, does that
Yes.
accurately?
fine.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Thank you.
And Mike actually answered A2 because I had a
Okay.
question. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. I successfully unmuted myself. So this is primarily a focus on the general fund. We have other funds, like 13 other funds. So I'm kind of confused about, and the primary, when you say maintain management and reporting, when I see reports, it's primarily the general fund, water, and maybe golf and the community center. I mean, but we don't see any other funds really very often. So I'm like the highway fund, there's like a ton of different funds. So I'm kind of confused about what we're maintaining. Are we going to improve the reporting and get those other funds reported on? Perhaps have something that brings it together holistically, because we don't have anything that brings it together in a holistic manner. I have to do that manually most of the time. So I'm kind of confused. Maybe you could help me kind of think that through.
Okay. So looking at I mean, right now, to your point, the policies and actions, neither of them specify which fund or which report it is. So maybe that is something that we can look into adding of being a little bit more clear on what funds are being reported out. So in B1 is where we were trying to capture that the financial reports should be at various levels for different levels of knowledge for financial reporting. So I got your comment down, Richard, and maybe we can.
Okay, I'm just thinking that we should
Yeah.
probably report all the funds, because
Sure.
although they're not commingled, they do relate one to the other, and our fund transfers from one to the other in part, and so on. So I'd like it to be more complete than it is now, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yep, well, that makes sense. And Dave, I see you unmuted. Did you have a?
Yeah, I mean, we do, as an appendix to our monthly financial report, we do report on all the funds in the town, which is a comprehensive report. It's not front and center with the general fund, the HERF fund, the community center fund, the capital fund, the water fund. But it is an appendix. So I guess it's reported, but you kind of have to dig for it at the end of, or towards the end of the financial report. But it does show, take you from beginning fund balance to ending fund balance for each of the funds. So I think what we're, and I didn't really establish, we kind of morphed it since I've been here with the town, but I didn't really establish the current format. It's something I kind of inherited and figured that most residents and town council were comfortable with the format. So I've tried not to do too much tinkering with it, although we have expanded on it since town manager Wilkins arrived, and he's basically his idea was that monthly financial report would kind of be a single source of truth type report for the residents and the town council. So.
Okay. And Dave, while I have you on, before we go to the next speaker, can you just quickly talk about what the popular report is? And Jeff, that did, the only reason we added that to that action is it was brought up in the last meeting as something that should be maintained and specified the popular report. But Dave, can you just quickly touch on what that is?
Yeah, so the town produces it's actually called the Popular Annual Financial Report. And what it is it's basically a simplified, rolled up version, much less detail, certainly than all of the detail that's in the annual comprehensive financial report, which is our ACFR report. So the Popular Annual Financial Report is really intended to provide more clarity and information for the average resident, the one that's not as well versed in or doesn't have the need or time to to look and read through the entire annual comprehensive financial report. So we produce a popular annual financial report. So that's the report that's being referenced there.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Okay, well, Tony, Bill, and then Joyce.
Dave, regarding the publishing of the monthly reports, I'm kind of confused as to when we can find those. I mean, typically what I do is wait for the agenda for the Budget and Finance Committee. It's usually attached to that. But the page in which you have monthly reports doesn't, I don't know when that's supposed to update. For example, I found the December report on the agenda, but it's not on the website for monthly reports. Is there a schedule or a protocol as to when those actually get published?
Yeah, Tony, it's a good question, a good point. There's not, I guess, a defined schedule that we utilize. Now, the December, the mid-year financials should be on the website now. What we try to do typically is not post those immediately. What we try to do is get those out to the Budget and Finance Commission and also Town Council at the same point in time before they're really distributed in the public sphere, because we would like our elected officials and then also our commission members to have kind of the first crack at reviewing those documents and not kind of get caught off guard by the individual, by the resident out there that reviews it, and then town council member doesn't have a chance to review it or whatever. They're getting it in advance, or maybe they didn't know it was available. And so we try to give at least a little bit of advance distribution to our Budget and Finance Commission and also our town council before it really gets out into the public sphere. And sometimes we're better at this than other times, certainly. But sometimes there is a lag or a delay, and it's certainly not intentional, but it's us just getting busy and not really closing the loop and getting that pushed out onto the public website.
All
Is
right.
it
Thanks,
usually
Dave.
60 days? I mean,
If I may,
what-
sorry.
Mhm.
Appreciate the conversation. We do, Tony, I know you made that comment last time, which was really helpful. And so I do want to let you know when we get to transparency, we do have an action related to having clearer schedules, because we understand that's a want from folks. I do want to try to refocus us on the actions, policies, and goal. Under the things to maintain, there is management and reporting, transparency, annual reviews and studies, as well as maintaining essential services. So, and efforts to kind of look at the actions, policies, and goals. Do these, and I've been scribing down your comments for each one, but do these grasp what was discussed last time, or are there new ideas, as Mr. Farash spoke up about making sure also we're including a comprehensive report in the B1 action, but are there other areas in these, in what's outlined in the blue box, that you guys want to discuss? And Bill, I think you were next.
Thank you, Melanie. Let me make sure I'm off. Yeah. I'm a little confused about where on the first, I'm sorry, I hit the button and now I can't see me. There it is. On the first column about community guidance, toward the end, it talks about having the right control and funding for services. And then talks about no new taxes, property tax may be inevitable. I know that isn't exactly what you were talking about today, but I think it's important that we do have in here someplace additional revenues, not just property tax, such as a performing arts center that would bring in thousands of tourists spending money in our town, and bed taxes, etc., and annexations. I mean, so there are alternatives in terms of how we can meet the demands. I've always known that our finance department gets very high grades and awards for the reporting that it does. So I'm not smart enough to understand all the stuff that you guys are talking about, but I do know that outside agencies believe we do an awfully good job of reporting. And maybe, with what you're hearing now, you can even make it better. But that's the two things, Melanie. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. And we will get to revenue sources. We definitely will get to annexations, property taxes, all those revenue sources that we discussed last time. We'll get to here in a few pages. But before we move, yeah, so
Okay, I'm sorry.
we're gonna go through all of them tonight. So all those topic areas we talked about 2 weeks ago, we're gonna go through each again, but the added information this time is the actions, policies, and goals associated with what we heard a couple weeks ago. So we just want to make sure that those capture the discussion.
I'm
So,
sorry.
nope, you're good. So under management and reporting, are there other comments, concerns, questions about the actions, policies, and goals just for management and reporting? And Mike, I see your hand up.
I don't have my hand up.
Oh, okay.
Oh, lower hand, maybe I do. Okay, yeah, okay.
No, you're good.
There we go.
All right. So not seeing hands up or hearing anything. And what I heard, just to summarize what I did here and what I took down was when it comes to action A2, we need to work with Dave to clarify what that means in terms of being more accurate that it's part of the general fund. For B1, action B1, maybe clarifying or adding that it also includes having a comprehensive report for all of the different types of funds, not just the general fund. But with that, does everyone agree with this first draft of actions, policies, and goals for just management and reporting? Is it capturing the discussion about management and reporting? Joyce.
I just wanted to make sure that you were able to put down, because I don't see it, when I asked about the good system for splitting funds, because there's actually an appropriate way of doing that. And David can provide that.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep, I will add that too to A1.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, is everyone okay going to the next page? All right, so this one, these actions, policies, and goals focus on focuses on transparency. And so there were a lot of comments that from last time about that the transparency is good now, but there could also be opportunities to improve, especially with the website, having more information there. As Tony pointed out, having a schedule of when things will be published so people are more aware. Making sure that the information is easily accessible on the town website and using a variety of platforms. And then also maybe there's other tools that we haven't thought of that may be available in the next 10 years that the town should just be at least prepared to be looking into to see how we can increase transparency. On here, you'll see that this is the first time you see the word duplicate. And what that means is, for instance, B on this page is the same as B on the last page. So in some areas, it did seem like the action, policy, or goal still worked well for what we heard last time. But again, we want to discuss that with you all. But that's what the word duplicate means. It's just that the goal, for instance, on all these first set of pages is the same on each one. Okay, so it looks like to start off, Joyce, you have your hand raised?
I do. For B4, and I'm sure it's just a word that's missing. It says explore tools to increase transparency of revenue expenditures, but I think it means revenue and expenditures.
Sure. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just wanted to make that note.
Yeah, thank you. Revenue and expenditures. And I'll give everyone a chance to read through. Rosa?
Yeah, so in the sticky note section from when we discussed these items, it mentioned comparing to other similarly sized jurisdictions. Do we have that captured on the working action side? Like a way to compare our each department and what we spend to a similarly sized like jurisdiction? Do we have that captured?
I do know we have it captured in a couple more pages, but I am going to make a note here that there might be room to add it here as well. So I will make that note.
Yeah, because I'd like to see that.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is Joyce. I just think that's going to be a challenge in the general plan. And I'll tell you why. Is not every jurisdiction is the same. So you may compare the police department to someone that's a city or town that's a similar size and population, but they may have costs that necessarily Oro Valley wouldn't have. So I think that's a very hard comparison to do. Just relating that in a general plan.
Sure. So maybe let's discuss that further when we get to, I think it's 3 or more slides. I'll make a point to remind everybody that this is the action related to that. And we can see how it's worded and if it needs to be broadened, to your point, Joyce, and to make sure it still meets what folks said. So. And then Mike.
No, I have kind of the same comment on that, is that if you want something like that, I think we probably need some more detail on what people actually would like to see so that you don't have overwhelming information that people can't interpret properly.
Sure. Yeah. And for those of you who are just, it's your first meeting tonight, please also, if there's things that you also think in terms of transparency, especially action steps that can help improve transparency for our related to financials, please unmute yourself as well. Or if you have questions about any of the actions, policies, and goals and how they relate to what was heard last meeting, please unmute yourself. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands or anybody unmuting. So again, I just want to ask everyone, do you all agree with these first drafts that they're headed in the right direction with relation to capturing what was discussed about transparency? Or if you have any further comments, please unmute yourself or raise your hand. Okay. Not seeing anything. I'm going to go to the next page. All right, so these comments are pertaining to annual reviews and studies. There were a handful that, to review things like fees, operations, SIP projects, project management. Here is Rosa, where we also brought somebody, here's where it's brought up about looking at similar cities for best practices or ideas to generate revenue or reduce costs, making sure that there's a cost benefit analysis for projects. So that's all. We tried to capture all of that in C1 through C4. So I'll give everybody a moment to look at that. And then, of course, there's also the policy and goal related to it. And so, Mike.
It says annually review. The city does a lot of annual reviews now. So I wonder if you want to say continue annual reviews or maintain, because we look at the policies, we do look at fees and so forth that are charged. So there's a lot of reviews that are done on an annual basis already. So I mean, if we want to list those to show people know, we could do that, or however you want to like to handle that.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, we could definitely add continue or maintain. I would caution us to start listing out the types of reviews just because it is a 10-year plan. So things may come and go or, but I do hear you on that it's currently being done.
That's fine. Thanks.
Yeah. Rosa.
We actually don't review a lot of the fees annually. It actually just came up in a council meeting because I attend most of them. And what was brought up is, when was the last time we reviewed our Parks and Recs fees? And are we capturing how many of these individuals are residents versus non-residents? And what is the differential? All this came up in a council meeting recently. So no, we don't review all of our fees annually. And in Parks and Recs, since it has gotten so big now, that's like probably a good thing to do. And also because council was interested in giving more of a discount to Oro Valley residents versus people who are coming from the outside to use our facilities. So that was kind of the gist of it. So I would say that annually it's important that we do review some of these annually. The other point was the impact fees. The three impact fees we get from construction. And that came up in a council meeting recently, like, when was the last time we reviewed these? Because we aren't going to have a lot of construction, but it does help to get, what we can out of the development we're going to have, because we need all the revenue we can get. So I was surprised to see annually in there, actually, because I don't think that all of the most important fees are on an annual review, just from those two examples. So I would like to know when we do review fees. And so maybe there is something more to be done with that, because it's come up a lot in council meetings.
Thank you, Rosa. And maybe to both your and Mike's points, we do need to specify C1 a little bit. So there is that clarification of maintaining the current reviews, but then also having more reviews for the fees that aren't done annually. And it looks like Buyer, did you want to make a comment on that?
Sure. Yes, I just wanted to second what Rosa was just describing. So our water utility fees are reviewed annually, but most of the others aren't. And there's a whole handful of them. So they have not been consistent over the years in terms of time frame. So some are dated without a question. So thanks.
Thank you. Richard, then Joe, then Joyce.
Yeah, I'd like to go to C4. It says conduct a cost benefit analysis of all CIP projects. I believe one of the things that is supposed to be done, but has not been done by council over the years, is to understand the ongoing cost of all of these CIP projects and investments. In other words, not just what do they cost, but what does it cost to maintain them over the years, whether it be a park or whatever we're building. We haven't been doing that, and it just creates challenges for future financing of the town.
Great. Thank you, Richard. And I do think we tried to capture that later on, so I will check back with you just to make sure we did in a different action, but I also took it down here that maybe we need to add it as well, that it's for long term. Okay, and then I think it was Joe next, and then Joyce.
Two comments on C1. Wouldn't it be better to debate what annually means? To say establish a schedule to review fees for potential increases?
Yep.
Okay. I think that from a management perspective would be better handled, easier to do than an annual review, because maybe if we have something that generates a fee, and I'm making up numbers, of $500 or $100,000, and we have something that generates fees of $500,000, where should we be looking, and shouldn't we have kind of prioritized listing? of what fees and when we're going to review. The second thing is, while conceptually doing these types of reviews, C1 through C4 make a lot of sense, there are also costs involved in doing reviews. And is that the best allocation of resources to have review upon review upon review? Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Okay. And I did get your comment down about maybe instead of trying to specify when the reviews are in the general plan, it's better that it may be better to establish a schedule for those reviews as a first step. Okay, Bill, I think you were next. Oh, there you
I'm
go.
not good at this. I think it was Rosa who said earlier about comparing the concerns about comparing to other towns or cities. And I don't see that here, except I see research best practices of similar cities. I think that's should happen without question. And that doesn't mean, that we have to be compared to those cities, but rather but rather what are the best practices that we can use. And I have a feeling that David and his folks do that already. But the other part, no, never mind. I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Bill. And maybe before we go to the next person, I do want to check in with Rosa. Rosa, do you feel that that C3 captures kind of the intent behind the researching other jurisdictions, or?
So I was just looking at, like, I guess other constituents have brought this up to me, like what is another, like our budget is what, 150 million? What our budget, our population, how do we compare? Like, and then obviously different jurisdictions, different cities are going to be different on how they get their revenue. But just, I think a lot of people wonder when we start talking about other sources of revenue and, and what we have versus what other places have. Like when people say we don't have as many restaurants or amenities, I think it's just helpful sometimes if we can just have some information on how we compare. Size of our police department, 48,000 people, size of our police department, like that type of thing. And I know those metrics exist. It's just hard for the average constituent to come across them, just because I think that's where that was coming from when somebody suggested that, like, because I've heard it before. I've heard it a lot, actually. Like, how do we compare to like another, city? And one thing to remember is we are a town, not a city. And there is a difference, but still, I do know that people have asked, talked to me about it before, and I've engaged in conversations about that. So it's just, that's what I thought, if we could capture that for people who are not as finance savvy as some of the people on this call and just want to know how do we compare to other places. So that's where that came from.
Thank you, Rosa. And I've taken that note down and seeing if that's a possible add. Joyce and then Tony.
No, I think, Rosa, I think those are good comparables when you're looking at other statistics. You can't always look at a budget because of the different costs that are involved with maintaining them, but certainly FTEs in your police department, those kinds of things, you just have to take other things into consideration. But those are good things to look at. But I think I was with Joe when the annual for all of the fees and all may not be manageable for staff. I think that there should be probably different ticklers as to when those fees should be reviewed. For example, they could set up like a matrix. The population has increased by 5,000. So what do we need to look at? Definitely parks and recreation would fall under that. And then you have other revenues like impact fees, which really are state driven. So you have to be kind of careful when you say all revenues. Definitely water is done annually. So that should continue to be done annually, but I think annually for all revenues is maybe not possible, not only for staff, but for mayor and council to review and have citizen input within a year.
Okay. Thank you. And I got your comment down. So yeah, we'll definitely work on C1 to kind of be more specific of what fees are being reviewed and when, and how to approach that one. So we'll work on that one. Tony, I think you were next.
Regarding CIP effectiveness and efficiency in terms of reporting, the CIP is published every year in terms of like a 10-year projection. I had to ask for a special report to see what the actual spend was on in that same format. And I don't know if that it falls under what you're saying, your conducted cost benefit analysis for all CIP projects, is to be able to easily compare what we budgeted in the next year to what we actually spend on capital.
Okay, let's see. So maybe if I can, Tony, ask a clarifying question. So for C4, is your question more of clarifying what we mean by cost benefit analysis?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, is it doing a comparison of what we budgeted versus we spent, or is there something else in terms of the bang for the buck that we spent? I'm not sure what that means.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and I'll work with Dave to clarify that one as well, and we'll get it refined. Let's see, we have Mark and then JJ.
Thank you. I've done, going back to the comparable cities or towns analogy, I think we need to be pretty careful there because I've done extensive analysis of similar sized communities in my prior professional life. And you have to cast a pretty wide net because there are so many nuances, geographic disbursement, community expectations. There are a lot of things that go into this. For example, a comparable city to the Tucson metropolitan area is Oklahoma City, and that's a fairly reasonable comparison. So you have to look at a lot of things. And I would want us to, if we're going to do a comparable cities, which I agree with conceptually, you want to go outside the envelope of Arizona because there really are probably no comparable cities in Arizona, and make sure that it's broad enough and that we understand the nuances of those communities and how they may impact that comparable analysis, because to find one that really fits is going to be exceptionally difficult. So we would probably need, in the prior times that I've done this, we've had as many as 10 comparable cities to kind of blush out those nuances and kind of find a reasonable mean.
Thanks, Mark. And with these, the balance or the dances, we definitely want to be specific enough to make sure the actions implemented are actually addressing the resident priorities, but broad enough that they can stay relevant for 10 years. So some of those specifics we may not put in the general plan in terms of how many cities and where they are, but very good comments to make so we can see if we do need to add those in. JJ, then Richard.
Thank you. Mark, I think hit it right out of the park. Comparing cities is extremely complex, and as a former business location consultant, we tend to gravitate toward police or parks per square mile or population and compared to sister communities in the same state, and it's still difficult. I would say about 5 or 6 years ago when I was on town staff, the council reviewed impact fees pretty much the same time the city of Tucson did. We may have even had the same consultant, but I think Joyce was correct saying that the state specifies when we review impact fees. It's either every 5 or 10 years if memory serves. And a really good example of comparing Oro Valley to surrounding communities, about 5 summers ago, the town council considered adopting a primary employer incentive program. And Oro Valley was compared side by side to Sarita and Tucson and Marana and in the county on what they offer and under what circumstances to retain and expand primary employers and attract new ones. And to the council's great credit, they unanimously adopted a policy, and I think the town is using it pretty effectively. So comparing communities is difficult, but certainly doable. Thank you.
Thank you, JJ. Okay, and then Richard and I just want to also maybe bring us back a little. Again, we'll get into the nuances of the actions as the plan's implemented. So what's included in that comparison, what cities are done, that will all be part of the implementation of the general plan. But Richard, I think you were next. And you are muted. Oh.
Hold on, now you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Sorry
Yep.
about that. I hit the wrong side of the screen there. I want to go back to C4 because it's where the big discretionary spend is. It's where the biggest part of the budget has been over the past. When Rosa says 150 million, I'm going to say 60 million of that is capital spending. So I think in capital spending, we need to spend a lot more time understanding what are essential spending, like certain bridges need to be fixed, and what is nice to have. We don't do that when we do our capital expenditure planning. The council sits, they look at all of these things in 6 pages and they make decisions, but I'd like to see it sorted out so we know how much essential spending there's going to have to be over the next few years and how much is nice to have projects would be over the next few years.
Great. Thank you, Richard. And we do have an action just related to parameters to review for SIP spending. So when we get to that, I definitely will call on you and would like to get your thoughts on that one specifically. Okay, any other comments on C1 through C4 or on what's outlined in blue on this sheet with regards to annual reviews and studies? And a lot of great comments. Again, we'll continue to refine these and work some of the comments that you gave us tonight in. But at this point, is everyone in agreement that these are headed in the right direction, knowing we still have some work to do? Okay, I'm going to move us on to the next one. So the last area.
Question, when you ask if everybody agrees or disagrees, why don't we just have us hit the raise hand? We all agree.
It might be easier if you don't agree or if you still have comments.
Or
to
if you
make.
don't agree, okay, if you don't agree,
yeah.
raise your hand.
But thank you, Joe. Appreciate, yeah, I definitely want to make sure that everybody's able to give their react. So appreciate the gesture. Okay, so the last one under things to maintain were essential services and infrastructure. And again, this is our next one as well. So this one just focuses on making sure there's funding for essential services, which what we heard last time were safety, streets, water, park, and community facilities. But I do want to also let folks know that there is a action to Richard's point about what parameters should be used when funding projects, even those ones. So give everyone a moment. So Joyce?
One of the clarifying items here is you have the guidance, which doesn't include streets or walking paths, bike lanes. But then when you go to D1, it includes just streets. But I think what you're just trying to say here is you're looking for us to maintain everything, right? Whatever that is. Because the more that we get into streets, that's going to be one of the most important things that are going to come up is who's maintaining my street, the one that I drive on. So it just, to me, that was missing in one area, but it was in the other. And I don't know if we need to clarify the guidance and then be a little bit more specific in working actions. Just a thought.
Yeah, no, appreciate the comment, Joyce, and you're right. This group definitely focused more on safety, rec facilities, and water. Right now, we also have a group talking about transportation, and they talked about road maintenance, and road maintenance was also preserving our roadways was prioritized by 91% of residents. So that was one of the highest priorities from the survey. So that's also where that stems from. But I do hear you. Streets can mean also multi-use paths, other things as well. So right now, it's just,
Where there are sidewalks, right? You
yeah.
have
So
so much infrastructure there in the right of way that does need to be maintained.
yeah, and so right now it would be all of that within a public street. So the private streets are definitely maintained by HOAs, just to clarify.
Oh, mine is city. Just saying, we turn them over.
Yeah, the private streets. Sorry, I just meant the private. That doesn't mean neighborhood. Whatever is private street, they're maintained by the HOA.
Well, typically gated communities are private streets.
Yes, thank you, Joe. Yep. Yeah, but I hear you, Joyce, making sure that the streets includes all those things. Bill?
Yeah, well, I don't want to repeat everything I said earlier, but I guess it fits in here someplace in terms of ensuring that we are exploring any additional new revenues that don't include taxes or of any kind, including property tax, like a performing arts center or the things that the Oro Valley Theater Company does in the arts arena. If you talk with tons of people why they like Oro Valley, the arts and our reputation for the arts is important. So, but I don't want to see us just say, well, we can't really do much except increase current taxes and or go to a property tax. And we also have the ability to annex 880 acres in the west end of town, which would turn out to be an annuity for the town with all of the construction and additional people paying sales taxes. So I don't know where that fits here, Malini, but hopefully you can figure out where it should go. But I don't want us to give up on that. I think we can find additional revenue sources that aren't all paid by us either, by tourism, increasing tourism. So
Yeah, so Bill, we're gonna get to revenue sources. We
Well,
have we have a couple more to get through
I
before we
did
get
it
there.
again, didn't I? Sorry.
No, you're good. Well, but I do want to let you know, I promise we're gonna get there.
I'm not gonna
So
say it. I'm not gonna say it again. So
no,
hopefully
it's okay.
you transfer where it belongs. Thank you.
So just want to refocus everyone though for a moment. So on this one, I did get Joyce's comment about essential services and streets. Any other comments though on D1, D, or the goal that goes along with it? If you'd raise your hand. So Tony?
Just, I don't know where this would fit or how we'd have the conversation, but the community needs to talk about how they measured return on investment. You know, whether it's qualitative or quantitative as it relates to maintaining services and infrastructure. It's one thing to say, you know, recreational facilities and see it, but you know, is it to retain a quality of life? Is it to attract, you know, more business to generate more revenues? Is it is the investment in capital to produce a profit? I just think a return on investment understanding by the community is how these kind of decisions will be made is worth discussing. I don't have the answer. I'm just saying.
No,
that
thank
seems
you.
to be missing in this
Sure.
this outline here.
Great, thank you. Yep, I got your comment down and we'll look at seeing how to add that in. Dick?
Yeah, thank you. You know, I'm thinking about streets, and I was on the council. We had a lot of streets to fix and replace and build out. And one of the key success factors was the RTA. The support of the RTA, I think, is mandatory for our region, and more specifically for Oro Valley. And they're going to have an election, and we're looking at revenue sources and fixing up our streets. We have to consider our support of the RTA application of their half-cent sales tax that's coming up. And I want to make sure people understand that that was one of the major reasons we got North First, got La Cañana, and got Tangerine, all done with RTA funds. And therefore, if we're to do any more major streets in Oro Valley, I don't know where they would be, maybe in some annexed area, we're going to need support from the RTA. So I think that something needs to be in there about that source of revenue, or that source of significant funds to do what we need to do on our streets.
Right. Thank you. I got that support of RTA, and that maybe we can also further discuss with the revenue sources, but I did get it down, Dick, so we can look in ways to add that as well. Thank you. Okay, other comments, Joe? Joe, you might have to unmute yourself.
Anyway, I think Dick made a very good point, but I think we should be saying, rather than support of RTA, we ought to have wording that says we should support and contribute to intergovernment agencies such as RTA, blah, 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 whatever they are, rather than just limit ourselves to a specific, lack of a better term, taxing authority.
Yeah, nope, good point. Thank you. And yeah, that's a good thing to keep in mind. This is a 10-year plan, so RTA may evolve or change in 10 years. So good point. All right, are we good to go to the next one? Oh, Richard?
Yeah, I had a problem with supporting regional efforts. I just think we ought to evaluate what the benefit is to Oro Valley to do those things,
Okay,
as opposed to just let's do it because it's good to do.
right.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll work on integrating that. That's definitely not captured in any of these actions. So again, the specifics of that we'll work on, and when you guys get the revised draft, you'll see those. Joe, did you have another comment?
No, you forgot to unflag me.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right. Are we all all okay with this one as a heading in the right direction, knowing that we have some things to clarify and add? Are we good to go to the next one? Joyce.
So I'm not sure if RTAs really belongs in this section. It seems to me a different revenue source, which may be worded differently than be very specific about RTA. I mean, the original RTA was just really for expansion of roads, and what you're looking for is maintenance and potential expansion. So I think we can word it differently in, working with other taxing districts. I don't know what that would mean, but I'm not sure if it belongs here, but in revenue sources. Just my thought.
Nope, good point. Yep. And I added that too. Thank you, Joyce. Okay, I'm gonna get us to the next one out of time. I'm gonna kind of move us along to the next one. So this one is a duplicate of that one. In terms of the actions, it does though start having discussing the long-term view. So if it's okay with everyone, there is another action that has those parameters about long-term sustainability of SIP projects. So if it's okay, since we talked about these ones, are we okay to go to the next one so we can start getting into the new language. But of course, if you have comments on this one further, please let me know. Okay. And I will let folks know when we touch it again in terms of the long-term view of SIP needs. Oh, Joyce, sorry, I did it.
I'm sorry, this was one item, and I wasn't sure exactly where it would be in here, but I think that the city should be coordinating their CIP projects with either private utilities or developers so that they can create this economics of scale. And I wasn't sure if that would be here or somewhere else. I do think that sometimes as a city, we don't have to do it alone. We can do it with the developers. We can do it with other public and private partnerships. So I think that's an opportunity for capital projects.
Thank you. And I am adding that as well. So I got your comment down. That is definitely not currently included in the action, so appreciate that. Oops, sorry. Okay, so I'm going to move on. In terms of prioritizing projects, there were a good amount of comments that the project should benefit the town as a whole. So this is also where, where we tried to add, you know, what are those parameters? What should the town be considering when looking at town projects? So it's that it's providing significant safety or infrastructure needs. So Richard, you brought up the bridge earlier, or if you know a bridge was essential. Enhancement to the quality of life for the majority of residents, geographic equity, and then also this is where the long-term financial sustainability comes in. So for those for maybe if I can call on you, Richard, if you have thoughts on this, if this is capturing what you were kind of wanting in terms of SIP projects or even all town projects.
No, I think it's got it right.
Okay. And then Joe?
I guess I'm having trouble understanding the term geographic equity. What does that mean?
Sure. So I'm actually going to call on Rosa. I believe you discussed that last time. If you want to kind of.
That's mine.
Yep.
Okay, so you can't spend all your Parks and Recs dollars within 2 miles of the town offices because we're up here in Rancho Vistoso and we'd like some. That's all. I mean, you can't spend it all right there where you can walk out in the town offices parking lot and see your bonanza. You know, the rest of us live in Oro Valley, or Rancho Vistoso gets very little Parks and Recs amenity money. And we have this Vistoso Trails Nature Preserve, which we inherited because unlike the other 3 golf courses, we were not rescued by the town. So the community bought the golf course and the town accepted it as a gift. And it is our park. It is the park, you know, that many 17 neighborhoods worth of people can walk to. And it's in atrocious condition. It's in atrocious condition. So in the 10-year plan, I would like some geographic equity over the next 10 years. I would like us to, and along with that, and you can add this, Malini, is level of service. We need to establish level of service in Parks and Recs. So for example, we inherited a community center that was a country club. And in the last budget cycle, I heard discourse back and forth between Parks and Recs employees and the council about why we needed 2 ice machines at the exterior of the community center. And they were there because it was a country club. And the comment that was made by the Parks and Recs person was, we need to maintain level of service. So I think maybe we should establish what is our level of service for our Parks and Recs so that maybe we can look at how much we're maintaining in some areas and see if we can squeeze some money out for people who don't live all in one area. And, you know, like I said, it's just a geographic equity is what are we spending our money on in the 36 square miles that we have for the town of Oro Valley when it comes to things that are discretionary. Like I agree with Richard, roads come first, bridges come first. water infrastructure, police, that all comes first. But we've spent in the last budget, I think that was the 23-24, we spent, was it like a 3/4, like a half, or, it was a huge amount of money went to Parks and Recs. And none of it floated north of Tangerine. So it's just my reason for being here.
Thank you, Rosa. I did get your comment about level of service. That might be a more appropriate conversation to have with our park when we get to the parks group, in terms of.
It's a financial thing too, though,
Sure.
because those were line items on the budget that were questioned.
Sure.
Like, why are we spending, all this money on these things that are nice to have, but really when you go to a municipal facility, do you have an outside ice machine? Do you have 2 of them? I mean, while people in some other neighborhood can't have improvements to a trail, that kind of thing. So
Yeah. Nope, got the thank you. Yeah, got the comment on here, and we'll see where it fits in, but I could see us having a further conversation in that group as well. And to your point, there is a lot of things that overlap with the 10-year plan. So with that, are we good to move on to the next page? Are there other comments with regard to making sure projects benefit the general population? Dick.
I have a little lack of understanding what essential services are and how we define that, and benefit the community as a whole. Both those terms are hard to understand. We look at what's essential to somebody isn't essential to somebody else. And benefit the community as a whole, going with Rosa's comment, that wasn't taken into consideration when the Vistoso golf course was bought. So those 2 terms need some kind of clarification.
Sure. So for that in the policy, to your point, the policy is broad. The further definition of those would be in your action steps. So the essential services, it was defined, and I'm going to scroll up for a minute, so just one moment. It's defined in the action related to that policy. So it's safety, streets, water, parks, and community facilities. And then the benefit to the community as a whole, the D2 action tries to define that better. What does that mean? Well, it means that it's either a significant safety or infrastructure need, it's for the quality of life of majority of residents, it has geographic equity, and long-term financial sustainability. So that's where the actions do try to add those definitions to the policies, if that helps clarify.
Gotcha.
Joe and then Joyce.
Well, not to belabor or beat a dead horse, the Vistoso golf course that was initially bought by private individuals for 1.8 million. And then through the, whatever the name of that place is, was deeded over to the town. And so I think we need to be careful when you're talking about the nature preserve, how it was bought and how it was funded, because it's could be misleading.
Sure, and
I lived on a golf course and I was part of that group.
yeah,
so
if I
little
may,
sensitive.
for this conversation though, that's getting really into the weeds. So even in the general plan, we'll want to kind of be at a higher level.
Well, I agree it's in the weeds. I just want to make sure we all at least have a basic understanding.
Yeah, and I think Rosa, you did a good job of explaining what you meant by geographic equity. So, well, that makes sense in the plan, but in terms of who got what, we can talk about that offline.
And I would also like to see in the next 10 years, that, and I believe it was Joyce Jones-Ivy, council member Joyce Jones-Ivy, that actually mentioned that the general plan for the next 10 years would be a good time to address something like, the amenities that we have up here that needed attention, because that's what the purpose of a plan is. Like, where are you going to go in the next 10 years with some, not all, but some of your Parks and Recs dollars.
Yep, and some of that I think we will definitely discuss more in the parks group. Then and to your point, all the other groups are essentially related to finance because everything does have to be funded, right? But we'll have those more focused conversations about Park and Rec with that group. Okay, so I do want to get to Joyce and Richard, and then again at 6:45. So I do want to get us to the revenue sources. I know there's a lot of comments around that, so we'll take these two comments and then we'll move to the next one. Joyce and then Richard.
I don't disagree with Rosa on wanting geographical. However, I think this is where priority comes in, because if you're taking infrastructure and safety first, this is where we talked about the innovation and how we decide what gets done, because our dollars are limited. Unless you have specific funding source to take care of something, you're going to want to take care of the worst before you take care of anything. So there are tools in place that you can use to decide which street is so bad, it just needs to be redone, or which walking paths need to be redone quicker. And that's where the prioritization comes in. And that's what I think this city has to define, or this town has to define. How are we going to prioritize those? Because your dollars are limited to do everything that everybody wants to do. So, and I don't disagree about geographical. I think there's something to be said about it, but you do need to know you have limited resources to do everything.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. And so the essential services do come first in both the policy and action. Because I think we heard that last time that needs to be the main, those essential services are top priority. But we can definitely work on maybe making that clearer. Richard.
Yeah, to Dick's point, do we need to define in the document what are essential services? For example, to me, they're pretty straightforward. Police, right? Water, and
Yes.
roads. Those are essential. Okay, now it doesn't mean everything else isn't important, but those are essential. Maybe I'm just asking, do we need to add that to the document? That clears up that answers Dick's point.
Sure. So D1 tries to define those, and safety, streets, water and parks and community facilities in that order are what was defined from the group last time. Okay, I am going to move us on for time. So this next group was about ways to lower costs. So we had a good discussion about either lowering costs or lowering services. And it seemed like from most of the group, what I heard was look for ways to lower costs through either making sure we're reviewing processes, contracts, management practices, just to make sure we're more efficient and optimize performance, but also reduce costs. Those are captured in E1 through E3. Again, if there's anything missing, or if you think any of the actions, policies, or goals aren't clear enough, please raise your hand. And then Joe, and then Joyce.
I have no comment. I don't know how my hand got up.
Thank you, Joe. Joyce.
So my question is, and this is probably for David, I think the town was actually undergoing some process improvement with Six Sigma. And okay, so you were at the time, is that ongoing?
It is.
Yes.
Okay, so it's already happening.
Yes.
So it's just really continually to encourage that process improvement. I think that's fine.
Yeah, we have ongoing employees that are engaged in obtaining Lean Belt certifications.
Okay.
Yep.
Very cool.
We kept it broad here because again, in 10 years, it might be
something else.
Not lean. I don't think.
Yeah. No. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments on this one? Is everyone Oh, Tony?
That's, there's a couple of examples that within the community where, resident groups have formed to help leverage things that the town needs to accomplish. That we shouldn't have to, there's ways of doing things collaboratively with community groups, like the Vistoso group that was able to acquire that facility. In their desire, I think, to stay engaged in helping make that park special, that it shouldn't always be, well, that's staff's job and we don't want the residents to do that. I think that's a way of making things more efficient in our community, is to encourage and engage residents in some of this work that needs to be done.
Thank you, Tony. And that I did get that down as a possible add for the group. So you're absolutely right. There's like the Adopt a Road program that helps maintain, at least remove debris from the roads and litter. So and saves the town money by not having to do so. So we can add that in. All right, not seeing any more hands. I'm going to assume that we're headed in the right path on this one too, with some ads. I'm going to move us on to the next one. So this one, for this conversation, we were talking about if there were services that should be cut. And what I gathered from that conversation was that is part of the budget process, but really the rest of the community needs to be involved in those discussions. So this one aims to make sure that there's a variety of tools and methods used to engage the community in more of the finances for the town, including the different revenue sources, level of service, and town projects. Are there any comments on this one? Okay, I'm going to move us on to the next. Not hearing anything. I'm again going to assume that everybody is in agreement that this one is headed in the right direction for what was heard. All right, so before we get to the next one we talked about how before any services are reduced, we need to make sure that the core values in Oro Valley are being maintained. And there were a couple questions about what are the core values. So I just want to quickly show everyone the draft vision statement. This is based off what we heard over the past year. And it really does try to encompass what those core values are. So what we heard was the sense of community, safety, natural beauty, outdoor recreation, culture, as well as arts and culture are all values in Oro Valley. And so with that leads us to the last one about reducing services. Here again, it was making sure that we maintain those essential services. So as Richard, I think you went into these a little bit. It's the safety, streets, water, and then the park and community facilities. And then again, making sure that the community is engaged in discussions with regard to town finances. So the ones on this page are all duplicates, but do you feel that they meet the conversation about making sure the core values are maintained? Is anything missing? Or any other questions or comments? Joyce.
Quick question. So, and I'm feel bad that I don't know this. While we're defining what may be core, is there anything else that defines core? Like, has council decided what's core? Is there anything else in the town that says what's core? Or is that what this general plan is doing, is defining what's core?
So that is definitely what the general plan aims to do. And so in every general plan, for instance, public safety, natural beauty, environment have always been core values, I think, since Oro Valley originated. And so, but part of this process is still defining what those core values are, and that's where the vision statement starts to starts to define what the core values are, is through this process. Does that help answer your question?
I think it does. So, I mean, water is definitely, I think, up there, and our availability to go back and forth, right? Whatever our infrastructure is, our walkability, the natural beauty, definitely. I was just curious as if there was any other defining factor other than the general plan.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
It's mostly through the general plan.
Thank you. So are we on target then with all the other groups?
Yeah, so
Okay.
no, that's a good point. So that's where also in this one, I know you guys spoke a lot about safety and water and parks, but the streets again came up in another group. Safety, that was a top priority from other groups as well. So it's so far it's all aligning between the groups. And then Sherry.
Yes, hi. I know one of the things that I hear on a regular basis is how a lot of residents, continually want more restaurants and they want more things to do. And I know that there's a lot of things that the town of Oro Valley and the Oro Valley Chamber do to support small businesses, but I don't really see anything that we have in here where we're, what we're doing in our strategic plan to continue to support small businesses in Oro Valley.
Thank you, Sherry. I did get that down. So actually in your next set of meetings, and not that will be the focus of the conversation, is employment, business attraction and retention,
Okay.
as well as tourism. And I know small and local businesses will be part of that conversation. So we will get there.
Wonderful.
Appreciate you speaking up. All right, anything on this one, or I'm going to go to the next one? Okay. All right, so now let's get into the revenue sources. This first batch, there's good conversation about bonds, when they should be used, that they need to be, there needs to be a good repayment plan for bonds. Use taxes and user fees were discussed, especially about the possibility of exploring the use of use taxes, of the town using use taxes. Electric gas franchise fees, good conversation there as well. Again, exploring the possibility of those, but also keeping in mind that any costs added to the utilities are then passed down to residents as the customers. And then grant and partnerships, a lot of good conversation that there's grants opportunities, but also ways we can partner with other like federal, state, and county to help share resources. And then the last one in this bunch is property taxes. Definitely a lot of comments that that should maybe be a last resort, but not to be taken off the table, and more community input is needed for all of these. So with that, this is the first batch, and just to let everybody know, annexation, state shared revenue, sales tax, and tourism and economic development are coming up next. So we will get to those revenue sources here in a moment. So Richard, I saw your hand go up, and oh, there it is. You want to go ahead and unmute?
I pulled it down because you changed slides on me.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, listen, I think if we put property tax in the general plan, it'll get rejected by the public, period. I just think it's really dangerous to put it in unless the town's changed over the years. Every time it's been brought up, 70% of the people don't want it, period. So I don't think we want the general plan to get involved in that discussion. And that's something maybe the council could do at some point.
So Richard, let me ask a quick question. So the way that we, from what we heard from you all, and the way we tried to address it in here is through H1. So more that the town needs to get more resident feedback before any discussion of property tax. Do you think that that's a fair assessment of the conversation a couple weeks ago, or what are folks' feelings on that in terms of the way to address property tax and capture what we discussed last time? And Richard, I don't know if you.
I guess my only feeling is if you have the word property tax in the document, this will be a problem.
Okay.
But
got it.
that's, I just, it doesn't need to even be in there, because if it happens to come to a point where the town needs to do that, we'll cross that bridge when we get to that, but I don't think we should jump off the bridge at the moment.
Got it. Thank
Just
you.
my feeling, I want a plan that's gonna be approved, not one that people are gonna say, a property tax, they're promoting a property tax, and here we go. Just screws everything up, okay? So that's my only thought on that.
Okay.
Been there over 30 years, I know what happens.
Okay, will be problematic. Thank you, Richard. I'm just making sure I get your comment. And then we'll go, I think it was Joyce, Rosa, and then Bill.
So thank you. I actually, in alignment with Richard in that maybe we're defining what revenue sources the town should go for and be very specific. It's more general than that. It's whatever resources the town needs to provide the services that the community wants should be looked at and evaluated and have community input. But I think I'm with Richard I think we're being very specific on those types of revenue sources because that was asked in the community guidance. And, I have my own thoughts on property taxes because there's different types of property taxes, which can be good tools, but you have to ask the voters and you shouldn't take that out of consideration. So I'm thinking maybe this area should be more broad rather than specific.
Thank you. Got that comment. And then Rosa?
So I actually wanted to get more specific on the pursuing grant opportunities. I noticed in the town managers, the most recent town managers report, they're reporting on the grants they apply for and the ones they get. And I'm noticing we're not hitting very many of them. So maybe we need a grant writer. So maybe the town needs to, increase grant opportunities by investing in a grant writer or, having more resources to pursue grants than what we are currently doing. Specifically, the Parks and Recs ones they went after, I think we went after 5 and we got 1. So I think that it's helpful to be able to know how to navigate that. And I think it's a thing. It's like, if we're doing it on our own, we may not be understanding how to present information to be able to be more successful on some of these grants. So we did have a grant writer, my understanding is, and we don't any longer. So maybe just, I don't know how to beef that up, but to say that, investing in more grant resources, like having a grant, a regular grant writer for the town to pursue that particular revenue source on a regular basis.
Okay, great. Thank you. I did get your comment down. And what I'm hearing so far, and I know there's more who want to speak, but that maybe these actions, what I've heard so far is that they may need the most work in terms of rewording and focus. And so Bill, I think you're next, then Dick is after you.
Yeah, thank you. It seems to me, and so I agree with Richard in terms of the fact that property tax is a death knell at this point, because everybody thinks the first thing that people will do is say the town's just not doing their job. They won't understand that, that it needs more revenue. But I don't think we look at property tax or put it in the next 10 years, as something that we should be considering, as long as there's other alternatives. And I come back to the annexation. Theoretically, we have the 880 acres to the west side of town, and the state land has told us that if they could work with us on that, well, then they consider Royal Grande, which would double the size of Glenview. Glenview, that's where I used to live, Oro Valley. And so I think as long as there are other viable alternatives, that's what we should be going for. Yes, if in the middle of the 10 years we run out of money or none of the other revenue sources happen, then sure, it may be, but it's gonna have to be in a way that the people say, yeah, we just need more money. Their town's doing a good job. And I think that's important to not put it in the that they would consider property tax. I think we have to go on the basis we have other alternatives. So, thank you.
Okay. So maybe, let's see, let's go. Dick and then JJ.
I'm here. Anyway, there's these various funding actions are really kind of up to the situation that the town is faced with, determining what kind of resources they're going to use to raise the revenue. I'll give you an illustration. Back in the early days, early 2000s, we went out to San Francisco, the town manager, myself, finance director, and our bond guy from Phoenix. And we met with Standard & Poor's, and we met with another bonding company. And we took our message with us, why we are so creditworthy that they should raise our rate in terms of making us a AA plus or whatever. And we ended up taking our existing bonding, which was all callable, and then we called them and reissued lower rate bonds. And that worked out really well, but it was an issue at the time. And I think the council looks at the situation and determines what is appropriate for whatever they're trying to raise money for. And I looked at what Bill said about annexations. That is, in my mind, is number one, ease of getting people that pay property tax, not property tax, but sales tax, growth, development fees, and so on, and gives us more expansion without affecting the, in many cases, the existing population. And we should look at sales tax as a way.
Dick, I apologize to interrupt you. Annexations and sales tax are on the next slide. So if I may, have you pause on that note, and we'll definitely get to it here in a moment. Is that okay?
So we're on just bonds then, huh? No.
Yeah, so what's on the screen, we'll focus on the revenue sources on the screen, and we'll, annexations and sales tax are on the next screen. So we'll get there in one moment. I
Right.
just want to make sure that JJ or Frank or Kristen don't have more comments on these sources. So JJ?
Thank you. I'll have comments on the next slide, but one overarching goal is to just find new ways to grow the economy. And there's a lot of ways to do that, but just grow the economy we have, and I'll save other comments to the next slide. Thank you.
Thank you, JJ. And Frank?
I would just comment on the bonds. They're really not revenue, they're a source of capital. And perhaps that clarification needs to be more evident when this is presented to the public, because the public views bonds as revenue. They have to be repaid, and there's a cost to repay them.
That's a good clarification. And then Kristen?
Just like a quick thought, and this, like Joyce, I don't know, you might have more insight on this, but I hesitate to assign a specific funding type for something. So when we say issuing bonds for qualifying CIP projects with robust repayment plans, maybe we should say something like prioritize issuing bonds. But I don't think that we should tie our hands with saying, okay, for this specific thing, this is how we have to fund it.
And I do believe, and good point, Kristen. I believe that came from part of the discussion last time was that bonds could only be used for certain projects, but to your point, that doesn't mean we need to specify that in the plan, as long as we're maybe prioritizing bonds if that's what the group thinks they should be, if the group thinks they should be prioritized. Joyce and then Frank.
I was just going to say, Kristen, I think that's where, you know, Richard or I are saying in the plan, we shouldn't specify how anything's funded. I mean, that's going to come up to what mayor and council and the voters specify when it comes down to it. So I think that's why it's very specific here in the general plan. And I think we need to make it more robust to give the town options as to how they're going to fund, especially operations, because that's where your issue is going to be, is in operations, and then maintaining what you have. So I think that's right, Kristen, is that right now it should be broader and not so much specificity.
So real quick, just to respond back to that, sorry, Malini, for jumping in, but then Malini, my question to you is, should our job then be to kind of prioritize or rank funding sources, saying the town would prefer, or the residents would prefer town council to think about these types of funding sources before you think about these other types of less desirable funding sources or capital sources? Should that be our job here for this section?
So for both, for the prioritization, so I would actually refer back to what we heard in phase 1, because we, in a sense, got somewhat of a prioritization through that phase of the big community survey, which is the tool that was statistically projectable to all Oro Valley adults. But I do hear a lot of your comments that specifically FG1, action FG1 is too specific, and we need to broaden it to give more guidance on how the fund, on what sources should be used, not specifically how they are used. So I don't exactly have the answer on how that could be rewritten right now, but that is, I am taking your comments down, and I think you'll see probably the biggest changes with this one moving forward.
David will help.
Sorry, Joyce, I missed the first part.
David will help.
Yes, yeah.
Thanks, Joyce.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now, if everybody's okay, do you want to move to the other revenue sources? So we still have annexation, sales tax, tourism.
I've got a question, Malini.
Oh, yes.
Just jumping in here, sorry. You know, when I'm looking at the working actions and the steps, that last bullet point where it talks about viability of use taxes, I have no issue with that, but the electric and gas franchise fees in comparison with surrounding jurisdictions, that would require some exploration, because we currently have a transaction privilege tax that we assess on our utilities, which, you know, finds its way to our customers, the utilities customers, I should say. So I'm not sure that we could do a transaction privilege tax. I mean, I would have to check with legal, but do a transaction privilege tax and a franchise fee. I mean, it would seem to be like we were double dipping or double hitting our customers, or our residents, I should say, you know, that are paying these fees and charges. I mean, it seems like they're already paying the utility tax, and then to assess a franchise fee for the electric utility, that's going to find its way to our residents as well. So that just seems a little bit odd to me, but I'll make that point and shut up.
Yep, thanks, Dave. And yeah, we'll definitely clean this one up a lot, and we'll work with you, Dave, to make sure it's making sense. All right. Bill?
Yeah, just quickly, I don't know whether we should have it in here or not, but tourism to me is one of the highest priorities, because we have everything to benefit to the having people visit us in the weather and the mountains and all the things that we all value. I don't know whether
Don't interrupt. Sorry to interrupt you. Let me switch the slides. Hold on, hold that thought for one moment.
I don't think I
So
can.
hearing, so I'm going to move on from this one because it sounds like we're headed in the direction anyways. So the other options for revenue sources were annexation, sales tax, tourism, and then I do want to talk about state shared revenue because I know there was discussion on it that we weren't able to finish last time.
Right.
So getting to that one, so here are the actions, policies, and goals related to annexation, sales tax. And you'll see in the sales tax one, the conversation was more about not increasing sales tax, but promoting other promoting tourism, businesses, events, however, to increase sales tax through that way, through more spending. So that's where Kay tries to get at that tourism, but Bill definitely, I'm sure it can be expanded upon to make sure we capture everything. So
Well,
now if you
again,
wanna,
Melania, I'm talking about things like a performing arts center, if we can pull it
Sure.
together. You theoretically would have thousands of people come in and pay, and as opposed to us having to pay for ourselves. And I think that's why tourism is always, to me, a magnet. How do we do that? How do we utilize what the natural resources we have and let other people pay for 30 or 40 or 50% of our cost? That's all I wanted to say on that. Thank you.
yep, so
Oh,
I
and
did,
wait, one more thing. I'm sorry, Melanie. The fact also growth. We've not talked about it, but we have not done any growth that is not annexation. We have still areas that can be developed within the town. They could then bring people construction sales tax as well as people to spend money in our town and pay those taxes. So we haven't talked about it, but I think we should at some point. I don't know where that fits, but we should.
thank you, Bill. And I did get your comment down about the Performing Arts Center and tourism being a priority to generate revenue.
Right. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna go to Kristen, then JJ.
Thanks, Melanie. And so I'll just pick up that conversation that Bill left right there. I think it is important. We do have on here promoting and implementing a shop local program. I think it's also important to create a business-friendly environment to encourage new development. We do have several storefronts that are empty, and so encouraging businesses to move their business here to Oro Valley would be helpful in generating more sales tax. So I think, like putting on there, encouraging a business-friendly environment or business-friendly policies, or maintaining a business-friendly view on how we look at zoning requests and things like that. Wordsmith it, or the rest of the group can chime in there. But I think that putting something like that to encourage new business development, not just encouraging shopping at our businesses already, obviously very important. We want to make that a focus, but again, new business development as well.
Thanks, Kristen. And I will say, I think we'll maybe get more into those details in the conversation happening in 2 weeks when we really focus on the employment, business attraction, and retention. So again, a lot of these overlap. So I would maybe ask the group of we have that conversation more in detail in a couple of weeks when we're really focused on how Oro Valley can be business friendly, and they'll all tie in together at the end with the finance piece.
Okay, good. Because that was going to be my question, is because I understand that today isn't the conversation of how we can be business friendly and the different policies and things like that. But I think it's important to recognize business as a revenue source for the town of Oro Valley.
Yep. Yeah, and that's where also, you see the duplicates here, and other groups also have some goals and policies that your group's looking at. They sometimes have new ones. And so that will be part of, before we come back to everybody with this kind of longer list of all the actions, policies, and goals, is that's what staff will be working on, is making sure all those gaps are filled between one group or another, or one conversation or another. So even if they're not all captured here, but I hear you that with regard to businesses as part of the revenue sources. JJ, and then Dick, I think was next.
Thank you. To hitchhike on what Kristen and Bill said about attraction, when we talk about growing any economy, I look at it as an acre, the best use for that acre. Attract is an acre, attract new businesses and new visitors and other forces that will import net new revenue into the community. And then C, an acre, is create, foster entrepreneurship, people, early retirees. I can get into specifics in a couple of weeks, but create through entrepreneurship, people to export their services or import things into Oro Valley that don't currently exist, like a business consultant would, and so on. And then acre is R&E, AC, and then R&E, retain and expand the business we have. I know the Chamber of Commerce here and Sun Corridor and many other organizations are focused on protecting the business and expanding it we have. But we also have to attract net new businesses into the acres that we have and encourage entrepreneurs. And this is all very cogent to building an economy, which will kick down way down the road even a thought of having a property tax on local residents. Because if we grow the economy faster than the population, we won't need to enact a personal property tax on residents here, because we can outgrow the demands, the expenditures that would be required if we grow the economy faster than the needs of local residents. Thank you.
Thank you, JJ. And then Dick, and then Joyce. And I do want to let people know we're at 7:22. So
I'll go fast. Okay. Well, the annexation aspect is, I think, number one. We have to get the council, mayor and council on track to get that 800 plus acres west of Shannon, and then Royal Grande into the town. And on there, both those annexations have a lot of retail sales, items on the general plan for those places. And sales tax has a unique ability, and I was talking to David about this before this meeting, that the town citizens only pay, say, 60% of those sales tax. 40% are paid by visitors from outside the Oro Valley boundaries. So I looked at sales tax, something that mayor and council can enact without having the voters vote on it. And if you keep it rational and there's value, and we work with the Chamber of Commerce and recruiting retails places that generate sales tax, that'll be a wonderful thing. So I think annexation with the sales tax benefit from that is number one to go on to, and to help the marketplace grow the retail sales in that area. And I would like to see that take place. And I think annexation, we almost annexed that 800 acres during Kristen Sharp's father-in-law days as the town manager. I remember those days. So I think that's where we need to go. And the other aspect of what Bill said about generating growth or places where we gather money, and you take the Rooney Ranch gift that we got of that land is ideal for development the right way, which could be income producing.
Thank you, Dick. Byron, I think you wanted to say something.
Sure, please. I did want to point out that, you know, the proposed policy does accentuate annexations without picking out a specific piece of property. And I think that's important to leave the flexibility to for councils to approve an annexation plan. I do want to very respectfully share that I think there's entirely way too much emphasis in this meeting on the 880 state land and its importance to the future economy. The numbers of yield and whatnot, if and when that's developed, are not going to move the needle beyond a few years in terms of paying for capital improvement projects and whatnot. And there is not planned retail that's going to be somehow turn around the town's financial situation. So I think we should be careful about focusing on any one property when it comes to annexation. And it's very much driven by the property owner's desires. So that's why you're seeing a policy that's more general in nature. And that might be knowing that there'll be future more specific plans on annexation. That might be something this group should consider. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have Joyce, Richard, and then Rosa, and that will be our last comment for tonight. So Joyce?
So I'm actually going to echo what Bear said, is I think in this plan, it needs to be more general and there's no emphasis on a specific area. In there, under the guidance, you said should be done. And I think it's more prioritize annexation, because I've been through annexations before and it all has to do with the property owners,
Right.
whether or not they agree to it, right? So you have to give them something that they don't already have in order to annex them. And that is going to be a challenge for Oro Valley, just saying, unless it's state-owned land. I get it, but it will be a challenge. The only thing that the town has really is no property tax right now. So anyway, instead of should be done, I think that should be prioritize annexation. So it's part of this plan. We haven't talked about state shared revenue, but I just want to take it to the group. State shared revenues are based on census population. So with all your winter visitors here that we have in Oro Valley, I'm not sure this is their primary residence and whether or not they would be counted as part of the census. So again, this is part of the revenue that's available to the town. If they're not part of that census when it's done every 10 years or when it's updated on the 5th year, that's where we're challenged with state shared revenues, is the winter visitors and what they claim on their census. So just keep that in mind, because I'm sure that discussion's not done yet. And we'll probably end up talking about it next meeting.
Yep. Thank you, Joyce. Richard and then Rosa.
Sorry about that. I got something maybe off point, but I do think one of the things we haven't done is, and maybe this is part of the plan in total, but relating recreational assets, cultural assets to tourism. We talk about it a lot, but we have no mechanism in terms of the way the town is organized to basically make that happen, so to speak. Have we ever given any thought to the idea of, let me see if I can read it to you the way I wrote it down, establishing an enterprise fund or similar structure with a commission to include all the revenue generating recreational and cultural assets with the objective of making them self-sustainable and a source of generating tourism for the community? I know this is something that the council through this their strategic plan is going to be considering. I think we need to think about that organizationally at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And yeah, we'll definitely get more into the details about tourism and what should be done there in our next set of meetings. Rosa.
I just want to top off on the annexation discussion. I don't think we should say prioritize. I think it should be considered like anything else, but usually the council has an annexation plan, and I think it needs to point to the plan because that's a more comprehensive way of looking at the trade-offs and the economic feasibility and all that. So I think this plan's getting too, I totally agree. We cannot get specific and say in the next 10 years, we have to annex this and annex that because we don't know, whether we can do these things. So I think we're getting too specific, and I don't think priority is the right word because it may not be what a council feels that they can do. So I think we need to choose another word like consider or, whatever.
Thank you. So I do want to point out what you see where it says should be done, and that's what I think, Joyce, you're referring to. Those are taken from the comments from the whiteboard that we got last meeting. So the actual action and the policy, the word priority is used, but it's in relation to using the instrument of the annexation strategy to set those priorities, not prioritizing anything in the plan. So I just wanted to clarify that. It's what will be in the plan is once they're refined, would be what's outlined in blue, not what's shown as the guidance from last time. All right, so it is 7:30. I do want to thank everyone for, again, a great discussion. We went through a lot, but we will need to have another meeting to talk about town finances, specifically finishing up the conversation about the revenue sources. And then we didn't have a chance to jump into the community involvement aspect. But to keep us on schedule, we're gonna, I'll be looking for some times to set up that additional meeting. But we will continue moving forward with employment, business attraction and retention, and tourism in a couple weeks. So we will need to add a meeting to finish this conversation, but we'll continue for those ones in March. All right, so with that, again, I want to thank everyone, and I hope you all have a good night.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Malini.
Good discussion.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.